What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the penultimate team selection video of the season. We've only got one more to go after this. And I'm going to be talking you through how my team is looking for the final double game week of the season, thoughts on transfers, captaincy, all that good stuff. And before we get into all of that, I'll show you how I did in game week 36, which ended up being very frustrating. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let's jump into it. So game week 36 was one of those weeks where it wasn't really terrible, it just wasn't really great either. I just missed the 100 point mark and finished on 99, which wasn't enough to get me a green arrow. So I now have had 2 red arrows in a row, although to be fair, I haven't really fallen that much. If you look at recent ranks, I was 42.6k in game week 33, 40k in 34, then I fell 407 places in game week 35, and I've fallen like another 2.4k this week. So I'm basically right back where I started in game week 33. So it hasn't been a disaster, it just hasn't been that much fun either. And I was on a green arrow. I think I was up to about 35k right up until about 90 minutes in last night's match. And obviously then in the final 8 minutes, Wilson got a goal and assist, and that just killed the green arrow and put me on a red. And I got Wilson's minutes completely wrong. I've got to hold my hands up. I thought for sure that he would be benched in one of the games. The only silver lining, I don't know if you can really call it that for me, was I was never going to buy him anyway. I was already set up with these 3 Newcastle players from a while back in terms of the defence, but Isak obviously came in game week 34 to fund my move for Trent, and at that point I don't think anyone was really seriously considering Wilson, and I was never going to make that swap this week. I knew that when they were both on the pitch, Wilson was probably the better option, but I didn't realise how bad Isak would be. Last night he was just terrible from an FPL point of view. Obviously did his job for Newcastle, but in terms of scoring points, it just wasn't there. I tweeted kind of jokingly that he was playing in a left wing back position. It wasn't far off that, to be honest. In the first half, it felt like Joelinton was further ahead of him because of the way they were pressing. Now, I don't think during the game Wilson had a load of great chances either, but he was more central and he was in better positions than Isak for most of the game. So, got it completely wrong, but I think for my team, I was never going to use a transfer to make that swap anyway, so I can't really be too annoyed about the decisions I've made. I just wish there was a better outcome. In the first game of the double, obviously Wilson was about to be subbed, then they got a penalty, he took it. It could have been very different, but it wasn't. So if you bought Wilson in, fair play, and if you captained him, even better. Massive swing this week, and we probably won't see a swing like that in the final 2 game weeks. So if you made up those points now, absolutely happy days. I did have a bit of luck this week. I played Kepa, he didn't play at all. Chelsea conceded, of course, like they always do. Edison gets a clean sheet and a couple of bonus points, so he comes on for 8 points. I was really torn between Trent and Estepinian, and as I spoke about a lot, I really wanted to play the double game week player, but by the end of the week, I kind of decided I was going to play Trent ahead of him. The only reason I played both was because Rashford picked up an injury. Now, I did bench Rashford. Some people seem to think that I played him and got lucky that he didn't feature. I did bench him before the deadline, but I wouldn't have done that if he was fit, and I might have missed out on either Trent or Estepinian's points. So that was quite big in the end. Obviously, Estepinian, absolute hero from the first game. Not so much last night. Trippier chipped in with 2 assists. In the end, he would have been a pretty good captain. It didn't matter for me because he's like nearly 100% effective ownership anyway. So the points he got last night didn't really help. But because I owned him, at least I wasn't hurt by that. And obviously, Matoma and McAllister, like Brighton players, it feels like there's a few cracks beginning to show. Really good performance against Arsenal, but poor last night, poor against Everton. Maybe they are going to be a bit hit and miss towards the end of the season just because they've got so many injuries and they're probably just a bit fatigued because obviously they're not used to playing so many games. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Fernandes comes in with an assist, Haaland 1 goal, and obviously Salah doing really well at the moment, so happy with that. So not an awful week. I don't really care about benching Luke Shaw. I was never going to play him ahead of Trent or Estepinian or either of my double game week Newcastle defenders. So not a big deal. 99 points, not awful, but it would have been nice to get a green arrow. So game week 37 is shaping up to be one of those weird weeks where I've got 2 free transfers. It's the final double game week of the season, so potentially a good chance to make up some points. And yet I don't really have any moves to make because my team is already pretty well set up, as I'm sure it is for most of you as well. So I will talk about some defensive transfers I can make in a minute, but let's talk about the players that I'm starting first of all. Now I am a little bit concerned about whether Edison Ederson will play all 3 of the remaining games for Man City, because we know that if they beat Chelsea at home, the league is over, and there's probably going to be mass rotation for that Brighton game. I actually think it's unlikely that Ederson plays all 3 games, because Ortega could come in. We've already seen that happen in the league recently. He's their FA Cup goalkeeper. I'm sure he'll play in the final. Pep might want to give him a game in the league before that happens. But he's not the only player to worry about. There's also Scott Carson. I can't remember if it was last season or the season before, but Pep Guardiola gave him a game almost as like a thanks for all the stuff he does behind the scenes, because obviously he doesn't get many matches in the league or the cup or the European games and stuff like that, but he still has to show up in training as that third choice goalkeeper. So even he might play, but ultimately I don't think there's much I can do about it. I'm already tripled up on Man United, so I can't get De Gea. I'm tripled up on Brighton, so I can't get Steele. And I've already got the other double game week goalkeeper on my bench in Kepa, but he was benched last week. Now, I do think he will probably come back in, but he's coming back into Man City away and Man United away. So I think I've just got to play Ederson and hope that he starts twice. But I'm kind of already realising there's a chance I've got to make a goalkeeper transfer either this week or possibly next week, because there is the possibility in game week 38 that both Ederson and Kepa don't start. So we'll have to see what happens, but for now I've got to play Ederson. I could do something like Ederson and Luke Shaw to De Gea and a City defender, but I don't think there's really much upside with that whatsoever. So I'm just going to stick with Ederson for now and then maybe reassess in game week 38. SGP, I think, has started every single game since like game week 14 or something. I've got no real worry about his minutes and stuff like that at this stage. Man City at home, obviously really difficult fixture. They'll almost certainly concede in that game, but Southampton at home is great. They're already relegated, and I'm not particularly worried about Brighton. They are starting to show some signs of fatigue, obviously injuries and stuff as well, but in between the bad Newcastle result, the bad Everton results, etc., they have played really well against Arsenal. So I'm hoping they get a decent result against Southampton. Clean sheet is a definite possibility. Trent's playing really well at the moment. No reason to bench him for a double game weeker, I would say. And Luke Shaw is really the only nailed on Man United defender. We might see, Dalot or Wan-Bissaka right back, Varane, Lindelof and Luke Shaw line up for the remaining 3 games, but it's not a guarantee. It could be Luke Shaw left centre-back in one of them, and then Varane or Lindelof to play right centre-back. So I think if you've got the money, you've got to buy Luke Shaw. And the beauty is, if he plays centre-back, he's good for bonus with a clean sheet, and if he plays left-back, happy days, he's a bit more attacking. So no reason for me to consider kind of benching him or anything like that. I think in terms of transfers, this is where it shows that I've really got hardly any moves to make. So one of them could be Kepa to Pickford. So I play Ederson in game week 37, and if I get to game week 38 and he doesn't start, then I've got Pickford at Bournemouth at home instead. I don't really want to spend too much on a goalkeeper. I've only got 0.2 million in the bank anyway. This doesn't really free up too many funds. It's just thinking ahead to game week 38 and not burning a transfer in game week 37. And if you look at the other fixtures on the final day, look, maybe the Crystal Palace goalkeeper against Nottingham Forest is better, but I think if Pickford doesn't get a clean sheet, there's save point potential there against Bournemouth for sure. If Forster was at home to Leeds rather than away, maybe I would look at him, but I don't necessarily trust the Spurs defence. Obviously, Leeds are going to be fighting to stay in the Premier League as well. Everson against West Ham. Look, West Ham fully going to be concentrated on their European final now, of course, and congratulations to them for getting through. But I think Leicester's defence is just too bad to bet on. So there's not really a huge amount of cheap goalkeepers to choose from that have great fixtures. So Kepa to Pickford is a possible switch for me, and then just roll the transfer into game week 38, which is something I really want to do if I can. This is the original move I looked at before Arsenal basically lost to Brighton, was Trippier to a Man City defender. I was actually looking at John Stones and then playing 4-5-1 and benching Isak. But now they're only 1 win away, and if they get that against Chelsea, like I said, rotation against Brighton, who's going to play twice? I certainly don't think John Stones will. So Diaz and Akanji are probably the best bets, but there's no real upside. Okay, if they get 2 clean sheets, don't get me wrong, 12 points, maybe bonus as well, that would be great, right? That's nothing to be sniffed at whatsoever. But if they do concede 1 goal in one of the games, there's no real attacking potential there. I know Akanji scored against Real Madrid, etc. Like, it's not impossible for Akanji and Diaz to score goals, but it's not that likely, right? It's not like a share for Newcastle that's very attacking and always on the end, the crosses and stuff that Trippier puts in, apart from last night when it was Dan Burn instead. So I don't really want to bring in a Man City defender when I think there's a real possibility they only play once. Maybe if Ake was out, I could talk myself into Laporte. Maybe he would get 2 starts, but it's just not guaranteed. And it doesn't free up any money or anything like that either. So I'm kind of... This was the move I was going to make, and now I just don't think I can. And the other move I'm looking at is Trippier to Kiwior. I don't need Kiwior, but this is just to free up funds. So I'd bench Trippier in game week 37 and play 3-5-2. In game week 38, they've got Chelsea away. Now, don't get me wrong. The way the two teams are playing right now, Newcastle should be favourites for that game. But there's 2 things that are probably going to be possible going into there. They'll have beaten Leicester in game week 37, in which case they will have secured top 4. Or they need to get top 4 by beating Chelsea. And look, you might be favourites going into that game, but you don't want to have to go and get a win away to Chelsea final day of the season. Either way, I think they don't keep a clean sheet. So I'm not worried about getting rid of Trippier. It's just not that great when he's got Leicester at home this week. But this would be to free up funds. And that's it, because I don't even need Kiwior in game week 38. Because for my team, Estepinian, Trent and Shaw, if they're all fit, I'm happy to play all of them in game week 38. But this would free up a lot of money. Because Kiwior is only 4 million. And I think going into game week 38 with 2 million in the bank and 2 free transfers, that does give me flexibility. So I'm not quite sure what my favourite transfer is at the moment. I think this one might make the most sense, just in case one of Kepa or Edison doesn't play. But in terms of the fun factor and flexibility, this one probably makes more sense. If you can name me a Man City defender that plays twice, then I would go for it. But I just don't think that's very easy whatsoever. So the back 3 and goalkeeper will probably look like this. There are some cracks starting to show. There are some concerns, but I don't think there's too much I can do about it. So before I talk about the midfield, I should say that I'm recording this before Friday's press conferences, so I haven't yet seen what Erik ten Hag has got to say about Rashford, but we do know he's already back in training, so I'd be very surprised if he's not available for that Bournemouth game, and if he is, I've got to keep him. Rashford and Fernandes, when fit and available, are absolutely nailed on. Of course, the same caveat applies to what I spoke about with Luke Shaw. If Man United beat Bournemouth and Chelsea, that is top 4 secure. So there might be some rotation in that final game against Fulham, but that's just not worth worrying about right now. They've both got to stay. If Ten Hag ruled Rashford out, that would obviously be a different story. I would then probably move to Anthony or Mahrez, but I'd have to fund that because I only have 0.2 million in the bank, which would probably come from doing Trippier to Kiwior, because then that would also give me funds in game week 38 as well. But I'm expecting Rashford to be fine, so he's probably going to stay in my team. Salah's another player that's going to stay. I think he and Liverpool are playing really well right now. Aston Villa at home is not an easy fixture, but it's not a bad one either. And obviously last day of the season they go and play an already relegated Southampton, so I don't really want to lose Salah. The only player that I would have even considered is moving him to De Bruyne for obviously Man City's double game week. I've only got Edison and Haaland, so I do have a free Man City spot. But again, if Man City beat Chelsea or Arsenal lose to Forest, Premier League is over, and I am expecting quite a lot of rotation in that Brighton game. I'd be very surprised if De Bruyne plays twice. So I'm just going to keep hold of Salah. Similar situation with McAllister. Obviously, he has just been benched. That has happened recently enough as well. So he was benched against Newcastle. He was also benched against Wolves, but played the 3 games in between. I don't think that happened, that's that second benching at least, because obviously he's probably off at the end of the season. I think it was just the rest. So the good thing is, going forward into game week 37, he's almost certainly going to start Southampton at home, which is the better fixture of the 2 anyway. So I'm going to hold on to him. The only player that I would possibly look at bringing in would be Eze of Crystal Palace, because he's a similar price, but I just don't think there's any point in moving to him this week, even though Fulham away is a great fixture, because obviously McAllister has those 2 games. Nottingham Forest at home last day of the season for Palace. I might look at bringing him in then, but probably not a move I'm going to make this week. The one player that I would potentially like to get into this midfield is Mahrez, because I do think he's the most likely to start both games in the double for Man City, but obviously he costs quite a bit of money. Now there is possibly a way to do it. it, which I'll talk about later on. But I think there is a chance that he plays both games against Chelsea at home and Brighton away. It's not a guarantee. I don't think there is a guarantee for any player, but I just think it'll be a very similar side against Chelsea that it was for Real Madrid. But I think Mahrez will come in for Bernardo Silva. And then in the second game, if there is a lot of rotation, Bernardo Silva could potentially play central, which leaves Mahrez to play on the right. And he's also played a lot in the Premier League recently. If I just bring it up here, we'll find Mahrez quickly. He's not even the fourth highest scoring midfielder. He's the fifth highest scoring midfielder. He started 90 minutes. They played 90 minutes in the last 3 games, 82 before that. He was benched against Arsenal. So he started 7 of the last 8. Now, we know what happens with Mahrez. You bring him in and that's the time he stops getting played. But things are looking pretty good. And if Haaland was off the pitch at any point, he would be on penalties too. So I'll come on to that move in a second. I don't really have too many concerns with Mitoma. I know he's not returned a lot recently, and I know a lot of people are starting to say that he's looking tired, not necessarily making all the correct decisions, and maybe that is true. But I think when you look at the Arsenal game, he had Ben White on toast, right? So he's still causing defenders issues. The points are just not coming. The biggest problem for me, it's not really what he can do when he's on the pitch, it's whether or not he's going to be on it for Southampton at home, because he has played the last, what is it now? Let's have a look here. He's played 90 minutes in the last 4 games. Now, we saw the benching for McAllister. He got benched against Wolves, same as Mitoma, then benched last night. Is the next game the game that Mitoma is going to be benched in? Possibly. It's a hard one to know without De Zerbi obviously giving us information, because I would think you play him against Southampton, you make sure you get that win because you're still fighting for a European place, knowing that it's going to be difficult to beat Man City anyway. But on the flip side, maybe you rest him in the easier game because you can win it with or without him. So I think there is a chance it happens. I still don't think it's a move to Eze that I would make. But if I had the funds to go to Mahrez, that is probably something that I would consider. And that is a transfer I could maybe make. So midfield-wise, Fernandes, Rashford, Salah, no issues at all. I think McAllister plays against Southampton, so he definitely stays. Maybe some slight concerns about Mitoma, but overall I think he's probably okay. And then up front, it's Haaland and Isak. And Haaland is almost certainly going to be my captain this week, like he will be for the majority of FPL managers. The thought has crossed my mind, if I'm that sure about rotation against Brighton, does that not mean that Haaland could also be benched? And of course the answer is yes, but I don't think I'm confident enough to predict that and just back against him. And of course, if Man City don't get a win against Chelsea and Arsenal do beat Nottingham Forest, then the league won't quite be over and Haaland will almost certainly then play against Brighton. So I just don't think it's worth the risk of taking the armband off him, because even if the league is won, he might play against Brighton, try and top up that ridiculous amount of goals that he's already got. If I was going to go differential, it would be Rashford or Fernandes, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to go for the boring choice here. With Isak, I'm kind of sick of him already, even though I've only owned him since game week 34. And to be fair, in that week, I played him ahead of Trippier. That went really well. But since then, it's not been great. When Callum Wilson is on the pitch and Isak together, Wilson is the better option. We already knew that. I just thought that Wilson would get less minutes than he has. So I've got that completely wrong. And now I'm worried that I'm not in a position where I can try and comfortably predict the minutes against Leicester. And if Wilson does play again, which is obviously possible, then Isak's going to be out on the left, and that's just not ideal from an FPL point of view. It is only a small sample size so far, but you look at his involvement last night, 0.14 at XG, 0.02 expected assists. Against Leeds, 0.05 expected goals, 0.02 expected assists. Just pretty poor numbers all round. Again, small sample size, but that's all we have to go on with those two playing together. When Wilson plays, he's on penalties as well. So it just makes Isak a worse option. Now, they played last night on Thursday, but they don't play Leicester until Monday. And if they win that game, that is them top 4 Champions League football absolutely secured. So they got Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. I now think there's probably a good chance Wilson plays again. So I don't want to make the sideways move, because it's only a single game week, then it's Chelsea away, even though Newcastle could absolutely blow Leicester away. But I don't also want to keep Isak. So there's really 2 routes I have. The obvious one is what a lot of people are going to be looking at. Just use 1 free transfer and go to Alvarez. Now, before you ask, do I think Alvarez is going to start twice? I think it's fairly unlikely, but I do think there's a good chance he gets 2 starts out of the last 3 games. So even if he gets 1 in the double and possibly minutes off the bench in the other game, then hopefully he'll play Brentford in game week 38, in which case I'd probably keep him. Now, I have talked about possibly going for a differential forward in game week 38. But as we've seen this week, Calvert-Lewin is maybe a slight doubt. Sean Dyche was quite positive about him, but I think he only started training today. So if he's not an option, then really my only other forward options are like maybe a Richarlison punt against Leeds, a Vardy or a Daka or an Iheanacho against West Ham. The options are fairly limited. So if I could get 2 starts in the double for Alvarez, happy days. And even if I only get 1 and he starts final day, that's probably okay as well. And then I could just concentrate my transfers elsewhere. Now, if you told me right now Isak's going to play as the number 9 for like 70, 80 minutes and Wilson's going to be benched, then I'd be tempted just to keep Isak and go for one of those other more boring moves like a Trippier out or a Kepa to Pickford. But I'm just not confident in that anymore. Wilson's played so well. I think Eddie Howe's going to want to start him again. So that's probably the number 1 move. The other move that I'm now considering, I've got to thank kind of Praz, who does the Burning Questions video on Fantasy Football Scout, for putting this seed in my mind. I was already wondering about how I could get Mahrez in, but I probably hadn't quite figured it out. And that is to do Isak to Ferguson. That could be Enciso as well. They're the same price at Brighton. Then Matoma to Mahrez. Now, this is not a guarantee of points. There's a lot of risk involved with this move, okay? So Matoma might get benched against Southampton, but he might also play. And if he does, that's a great fixture. Mahrez might be the best option in midfield to get 2 starts in the double, but he might also only get 1. So this is not without risk. Ferguson will probably not start both games in the double, but I think he will get Southampton because he was benched against Newcastle. He'll probably get benched against Man City and then hopefully would play against Aston Villa final day. So for a 4.6 million forward, getting Southampton from the start, maybe minutes off the bench against Man City, and then a start against Villa final day wouldn't be so bad. And I do think that Mahrez is probably the best Man City midfielder option to have for double game week 37 because I think there's a good chance he comes in for the Chelsea game instead of Bernardo Silva on the right, and the rest of the team will be similar to Real Madrid. And I think he could start again against Brighton either way. So that's why I'm tempted to do it. There's also some kind of overall rank considerations here, right? I'm 40k, 42k. I've not really moved much over the last few weeks. Most of my team is fairly settled. A lot of those players are high owned, including Matoma. So I'd be getting rid of a high owned Matoma that possibly gets benched against Southampton to bring in a low-owned Mahrez who might get 2 starts in a double for Man City at a time where you really want a Man City player for their double, but it's hard to find one that's going to play twice. So Mahrez fits that differential bill. Isak might be out wide left, and Ferguson might play against Southampton at home. So there's a lot of mights there. Again, I am not saying this is an obvious move, but it has at least injected a little bit of spice into my thinking for game week 37. The other downside is you go into game week 38 with potentially a Brighton forward that won't start and no money to upgrade them because they're only like 4.6 million. So then you're in the realms of maybe playing like a 4-5-1, either Trippier against Chelsea away or selling him to a different defender. And also this would use both my free transfers, so I'd only have 1 move in game week 38. So this is definitely the least flexible option. But if I did play 4-5-1 in game week 38 and Mahrez doesn't start, then I could move him to like a Saka or someone like that instead. Maybe even a Luis Diaz. He's someone I've got my eye on. If he starts against Southampton on the final day, I'd love to have him in my team. So I think this looks better for game week 37. But this move probably makes more sense because it lets me carry 2 free transfers into game week 38. And it's not a guarantee that Mahrez gets more starts than Alvarez over the last 3 games. So essentially, it's Alvarez and Matoma and 2 free transfers in game week 38, or it's Mahrez and Enciso or Ferguson plus 1 free transfer in game week 38. Now, when you say it out loud like that, the Alvarez move definitely makes most sense, but this one just looks way more fun. If you do get 2 starts out of Mahrez, happy days in the double, right? If you told me right now he starts twice, then I want to own him, right? No matter what happens with the points, that is a risk I want to take. And if at any stage Haaland is off the pitch, Mahrez would take penalties as well. So that's the consideration. There's lots of boring moves potentially with this team. Isak to Alvarez is currently the front runner. I could just free up some funds by doing Trippier out, but I think it'll be Isak to Alvarez. Maybe if De Zerbi says that Matoma is tired again and I think he's going to get benched against Southampton, I might take that risk. So let me know what you think about all those transfer plans. Lots to digest in this video, but obviously we're getting towards the end of the season. Lots to think about, trying to climb up the ranks. Haaland, boring captain, but I think it's got to be done. Let me know if you're doing something different. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Hit subscribe. I'll be back later on for final thoughts. We'll cover all the press conference stuff and any more of your questions. Thanks for watching. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon.